Answer class. Today we're going to be talking about fluent speaking, and we're going to start by breaking down a phrase and showing you how to say it fluently and naturally in English. We're also going to do a little exercise for difficult words, which we've been doing the last few weeks. So let's start with the phrase. When I say what's going on, I don't say it word by word. A native speaker won't say what is going on. We naturally link, connect, and reduce using contractions, linking, and reductions to be able to say a phrase like this fluently. So let's break down what happens in this phrase specifically. When we say what is going on or what's going on, the first most common thing that we do is to contract what and is, and it becomes what's. So what's going on rather than what is going on. The only time I'm going to say is when I'm trying to stress on that. For example, you said something's going on or it's been going on, and I said, what is going on? It's a pretty uncommon scenario. So most of the time we contract. That little word is just a supporting verb. Our main going on verb. Now, if I was asking, for example, where are you going? Where's it going? Then going is going to get the stress. Typically, the last content word in a phrase is what gets stressed. And by stressed, I mean it's going to be longer. We won't see the reductions there. But in going on, it's a phrasal verb. So I'm going to be stressing on the on. What's going on? So that also means that these three words, what is and going, may be a little bit shorter and faster in duration, and it's even more important that they connect together. Going from what's going, basically there's not much happening there in terms of linking. My S just kind of continues, and then I start my G of going, my G sound. What might be challenging for a lot of speakers is linking the ng sound to the vowel here in on. You can get help for this in my videos about linking ng, and I just recently made a podcast for you guys to practice going on, going in, going over, working out, doing it. Lots and lots of common ng, final ng connections to vowels and consonant sounds in everyday phrases. But this one may be particularly difficult because you're going from an ng where you're lifting in the back, the back of my tongue is pressing against the roof of my mouth, and then I have to end up on where the front of my tongue is lifting. So you want to avoid going on. You don't want to use an N here unless you're using casual speech with your friends. So you can say what's going on, which would sound like going on. So as I go between go and the I of ing, going, I'm doing vowel to vowel linking. That happens in either case. This you don't want to use in most professional settings. So it's good to practice making sure that the ng stays. If I say what's going on in a business meeting, it's going to sound too casual and unprofessional. So if I'm trying to do going on, I again need my going. My w sound is going to connect my rounded o vowel to my unrounded I vowel, going. And then I need to be able to finish the ing and come back into the open ah sound, going on, ing on, without a little g sneaking in there. So a lot of people will try this and they'll end up with going gone. What happens there is that when my tongue is up in the ng position, if I bring it down and there's a release or a burst of air, ing, that means that I'm building up pressure and air is coming out, and you're going to hear a g sound. But going doesn't have a g sound, especially not when it links. Going on. I have to be able to go from the ng into the vowel, ing, ah. So I would suggest just breaking that sound, those two sounds down, getting used to feeling ing, ah. And once you can do that without ing, ga, then you can go back to putting it in words ing on. You can also build from the back. So try saying on, so you're ready to do that vowel, and then ing on. I'm really just dropping my tongue into the ah position. And that should help you go to between the ng and the n with the vowel in the middle. Ing on. So this is technical details if you're finding that you're having these error patterns. Generally, as I'm linking what's going on, I really want to just be thinking about fast, and longer on. What's going on? Who's going in? What's going out? Who's going over it? So you can hear how in all those phrasal verbs, the meaning is carried in that preposition. Normally a word like on or over or out is not important, doesn't get stress, but when it's making a difference between going on and going over, it's going to get the stress, it's going to be lengthened, and going is going to become less important. So pretty detailed breakdown for this particular phrase, but you can see how what's going on is quite different in terms of the sounds than what is going on. And it sounds more natural, more fluent. It carries the correct meaning. So even if you are not really too concerned about how fluent you sound or how, American-like or American accent, how much your American accent sounds like a native speaker, you want to be able to get these rhythms and these connections, these contractions for conveying the meaning appropriately. Because the more differences there are in the speech, the more the listener has to kind of interpret what you're saying. And if you break from the natural patterns of the native speakers, the meaning can change or be a little bit different. Okay, welcome. It's nice to see so many of you here this morning. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat. I'll be turning to them in just a moment. And you can also leave questions and comments if you're watching this as a replay. I just want to do one other exercise because I want to talk about words that people find challenging because of how they're spelled. Or it's also sometimes words that people are mispronouncing because of how they're spelled. So let's look at an exercise. I want you to say these sounds out loud. I'm not going to tell you what the word is that we're working on. We'll build up that. Okay, so say this sound, I. Say this sound, and now add an N, earn. Now put it together, iron. Notice as I go from the I to the just like we were talking about earlier, I have a little bit of a y sound that connects it. Iron. It's not a strong y. It's just connecting and gliding those two vowels together. Iron. I could also write this like I earn, or I earn, or I earn. Okay, so let's say all of these. Iron, 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 iron. You've just said the word iron, as in the metal or ironing. This does not look like this. I think iron is one of the trickiest words to pronounce because of how it's spelled. It looks like the R, it looks like there should be an O sound here, like Ron or Roan, right? The I is fairly straightforward. So basically we have to think of iron as not having that O sound, and visualize it one of these ways, whichever way makes the most sense to your brain. Iron, that there's that kind of ire sound, and then we're adding an N, iron. So there's another way to visualize it. So when it comes to words that are difficult because of how they're spelled, it's really about revisualizing it in a new way so you have the proper information for what sounds are in that word. If you can say ire, you can say iron. It's just that if you look at this word, you're not going to necessarily think that it has that combination of sounds. To practice it, choose which way you want to visualize it. I'm going to say maybe this one. You can practice saying, I earn money at my job. I earn respect by my behavior. iron the clothes. So in I earn, we're stressing a little bit more on earn. In iron, we're stressing a little bit more like I. So you can picture an urn, that's a vessel, right? Holding an I inside for iron. So a lot of different ways you can do this. I just wanted to show you that basically when you're looking at a word, sometimes words are difficult just because they're difficult for everyone to say. But sometimes you think they're difficult because you see how that's written and you're not sure how to pronounce it. Or you think it's easy, but you might be mispronouncing it because of how it's spelled. And so these categories of easy words that are actually hard and hard words or difficult words that are actually easy, it depends on your experience with the word. But in any case, it's about having information to be able to decode what sounds are in that word and then say it correctly. So using your visualization, your respelling, learning the IPA can be helpful for some people, using respelling techniques like this. If I were to look at the IPA of iron, I have first syllable stress, I have the I diphthong, and then I have the n sounds. Iron, iron. But even the IPA in the dictionary is not necessarily going to show you that as I move from the I to the we connect with the y sound, iron. They aren't going to put that y symbol in there in most dictionaries. So that's a challenge that when it comes to within words and between syllables, that we always tend to do that linking for smooth and fluent speaking. Okay, that was what I wanted to share this morning. Let's turn to your questions now, and you can ask about fluent speaking, about specific words, anything that's going to help you feel more confident in pronouncing English, using an American accent, speaking fluently in English. Feel free to leave that in the comments, or if you're here live, you can put it in the chat right now. Okay, so we have a question about the dark L. So we have in English a couple of different ways we approach the L. And what I like to teach is that generally speaking, for the most part, you want to lift your tongue and touch it behind your teeth. Now, there is an L that I can make where I don't have to lift my tongue, and there are certain speaking contexts where it's easier not to put it there. But most of the time, the dark L comes at the ends of words. So if I'm saying feel, eel, eel, I can do that without lifting the tip of my tongue. But if I say feel it or feela, I need that L goes back to being a light L because it, again, connects and links to the next vowel. And then if I do feel it, you can hear that doesn't sound correct. It sounds distorted. So I think if you're a non-native speaker, it's better to make sure that your light L is correct, that you're lifting your tongue, connecting behind your teeth, and that you're not doing more of a liquid L that some other languages have. So like Italian, Spanish, some of these other languages, I think French as well, have more of an l sound instead of l. It's different in terms of your tongue shape. So it does make sense to understand that at the ends of words, we often are using more of this kind of dark L feeling, but I think it's more important to be able to connect and use your L in the middle of words like feeling, and just recognizing that a lot of what happens with the dark L is that we need a little bit of a sound before it. So one good place to start is the syllabic L. So in a word like table, or little. Let's do little because we have two L's in it. We have the initial L and this syllabic L. Little, What I'm doing there is instead of little, right? I'm not doing that liquid L. Little, The back of my tongue is kind of in the same position it is for the sound. So I like using words like pull or wool that have the and the ul to help with places like table. I like to think of it as kind of having the dark L having this extra little or schwa sound before it. Ul, table, feel. So in a word like feel, I don't want to go right from the E to the L, not feel, but feel, feel, which means if I'm moving from the E or the A, fail, that I'm going to have a y sound before my ul. So that's the most important part about dark L, is that I need that vowel to vowel linking, eel, ale, with that y sound. Or if I'm going from a rounded sound like o, like goal, then I'm going to have a little w connecting to the ul. Owl, ool, so school, pool, old, cold. It's really about the vowels that happen before the L and not so much about the exact position of that L. Because again, if I'm saying pulling or pooling, I'm really using more of a light L. Or if I'm saying school is out, I'm not doing like school is. My L is kind of in between a dark L and a light L. So lifting as I'm connecting L's and having a vowel sound before it to make it, to avoid using more of that liquid L sound. So I know that's pretty detailed and a little bit challenging and maybe a little bit different than sometimes what I talk about in my basic videos about light and dark L. But I feel like it's a complicated topic, and really working on it in specific words and feeling how it connects in phrases and sentences is going to be the most helpful way, and recognizing what kind of L you're using now and what needs to change in the mouth. Okay, thank you for bringing that up, and hope that was not too much information for you. Yes, okay, we have a question about in iron, the R is silent. No, so it's silent if you think about it as it doesn't have ron. There's no r sound, ire. It's more of an vocalic R. So ire. So again, what I was showing you before, iron. If I left it out, ion, it would be like the word ion. In British English and some dialects of English, they use more of a schwa, like ion. So they would use an sound, ion. But in American English, we almost never drop the R in words. The only examples I can think of are words like February, where we often just say February, mostly just because it's difficult and that's become a correct pronunciation. Almost, I would say 99% of the time or more, if you see the letter R in American English, we're saying an or a r sound for that R. So yes, we don't say I run, we say I yearn, earn, but we still do that that R in the form of an sound. Thank you for that follow-up on the word iron. Okay. We have a question. Yes, also in all right and girl, we also do the R in girl. I don't say girl, unless I was speaking British English. Girl, we'd also have the sound. In all right, yeah, I do the R in all right as well. So American English, if you see an R, say an R, basically. Okay. We have a question about the pronunciation of welcome. So in welcome, the spelling is not 100% straightforward. We have first syllable stress. Letter E says the sound, like in well or weather. And then we have second syllables unstressed. So my letter O says just the sound. My M is silent. It is like the word come, like come in. So you can think about it like well, come. I might write it with a U for the sound. But if you're familiar with how to pronounce C-O-M-E, the word to come, then it's going to be the same. Welcome. So welcome to class. Yeah, thank you for your questions and contributions, and welcome. It's nice to see you here today. Okay. So we have a question about the contraction we're and there. So we are contracts to we're, And if I'm stressing on that, I'm going to have the E sound. It's going to sound like the ear sound. We're going, we're talking. But often in fast speech, this part is not stressed because it's going with another verb. If I was just saying the verb are, I would say we are instead of we're. So we're tends to reduce and sound more just like the word were, which you can think of as this kind of were or Basically, instead of an ear diphthong, it just has the the static sound. So we're going, we're talking about it, we're meeting you there. And then for they are, that becomes there. And that's the same pronunciation as this there, which has the air diphthong. So they're going there to see, it's also the same as this there, to see their parents. So you want to think of that as having the air sound. That one may reduce a little bit where it's not a really strong air. They're going there, they're going there, they're going there. But it doesn't really become just they're going there. That would be strange. If it's not stressed, the air won't be as clear, but it's still always going to be an air sound. So like I said, they're going there to see their parents. You can picture all of them as having that air and the TH sound. Yes, I do have quite a few videos for pronunciation of contractions, both in their full form and in their reduced forms, and how to use them in fluent speaking. So thank you. That's definitely on topic for today's class. And we had a follow-up on the word welcome for the dark L in welcome. So in welcome, I don't feel like that one's a strong dark L. Certain vowels, the L, the the I, and the I would say when they are added to the L, you don't need to add an vowel. We really just do that with E, A, I, these front vowels, and then with oo, with o, and oo, and ow, because those tend to have that vowel to vowel linking before the o. In L, my tongue height is about right for the e. It's the same as it is for the so I don't have to do like L. That would sound distorted, or ill. So for well, fill, and full, for those three vowels, there's really no extra vowel before the L. It's just a straightforward, same as a light L. Well, can I do it without lifting my tongue? Well, no, it sounds distorted and incorrect. So I would say in this context, you use a light L rather than a dark L. Welcome. Yeah. Okay, so it's kind of like L Masterclass today, dark L Masterclass. Okay. Thanks everyone who's asking about my day. I'm having a great day so far. It's a little bit sunny here, and I'm doing this class, which I love, getting a chance to connect with you and hear your questions. Thank you for being here with me. We have a question about, so you wrote beagle, which is the dog. And I think you meant bagel because you're talking about wanting a bagel with honey. So you probably wouldn't sweeten a dog with honey. So beagle has the E sound, like beagle, and bagel has the A sound, like bagel. So that gull is a good example of the syllabic L, where there's a little bit of the sound before the L, like in pull or wool. So you can kind of say, like, try saying the word pull, then change your p to a g, gull. But you're not really doing a long not goal, but just going very quickly from the g to the goal, and then a long stressed a, bagel. I'd like a bagel, please. Can I have a toasted bagel? Interesting. I'm wondering if that's something that you like to order and people are having difficulty understanding you. I feel like that's a place where Context is also very important. So if you're saying that word not 100% correctly, and you're finding frustration where you're trying to order that and people can't hear you, making sure that there's some context. Now, in your case, you're saying you want it with some honey, but we wouldn't usually say order something like a bagel saying sweetened with honey, with a touch of honey. We usually would say that with like tea or something else. If you're talking about it with a friend, I like to put honey on my bagel, or I'd like to sweeten my bagel with honey, then that might help. But I think also mentioning something like a bagel for breakfast, can I have a toasted bagel or an untoasted bagel? That other word is going to give more context for the person to understand bagel. Of course, you also want to be able to say whatever word you're saying correctly, get all the sounds correct. But if you're asking or requesting something that's kind of, there's no context for the person, even though they sell bagels at that coffee shop, they need a little bit more information, and that often will help because we listen to the whole sentence, and individual words are not always giving enough information for someone to understand, even when you're saying it correctly or close to correctly. Okay. So we have a question about shadowing, taking conversation. Yeah, that's a great point. And so you're saying you feel that even though you're shadowing and mastering it for a specific conversation, you don't see it translating into your own conversation. So what I would say is moving from that type of practice where you're going to be able to sequence and get the sounds, for example, like what we started with today, what's going on. I think a really good way to transition from that is to take what you hear and build more sentences. So I do have a recent podcast talking about this, and it's called Repeated Phrases. You can use it for intonation. You can use it for pronunciation, accent error patterns. You can use it for reductions and linking. So an example might be if you had been practicing shadowing and getting exact pronunciation from a dialogue, and one of the things they said was what's going on, noticing that you're having, what's going on, that's the rhythm. So if I'm practicing that, I could change one word. For example, change it to who's going over, who's going in, what's happening today. So you're going to try to take the phrases that you're hearing and change one or two words and see if you can be adding in your own words. That makes it so you have some structure for your practice, but you also have to think of what to say, which is where the breakdown is between practicing a script and saying what's in your mind in a real conversation. So for example, say the sentence is, I like to travel. Then you're going to take that word travel, the stressed word, out and change it more to, so I like to travel. We're going to do fast and travel. I like to dine out. I like to sleep in. I like to run. I like to canoe. And then maybe changing it back to changing this word. I hate to travel. I need to travel. I have to travel. I want to travel. I forgot to travel. I remembered to travel. So you're trying to build up that patterning of what the rhythm is, how to pronounce those things correctly, naturally, and fluently, but also bringing in the element of having to think of what to say and putting in your own speech. So check out my podcast playlist for some examples and a kind of teaching method for this. And then you can start to try to apply it for other things that you've been practicing to make that difference between imitating and doing it in real life. My other suggestion is that when you're having a conversation, don't try to make everything perfect. Try to focus on one or two patterns, one or two things that you know happen incorrectly in a conversation for you, because when we're talking, there's no way to think about every single sound, every single linking, all of those pieces. And you can do that if you're practicing something over and over and it's a script. You can't do that if you're thinking of what to say and the grammar and responding in real life. But I can perhaps maybe think about, okay, I'm going to be trying to work on making sure my words with th, like the and that, have the correct pronunciation. Or I can work on making sure that I'm flapping and connecting getta, that is, hadda, with my flap T's as I'm talking. And I do have some shadowing videos as well that focus on that teach you how to just have one pattern in mind and then just build and rotate through your patterns so that you won't, the more you get to practice that in real life, it helps you move from practice to real speaking. You can also learn about how to generalize those skills in my American Accent 6-week course. Kind of walks you through moving from basic practice to more advanced practice. That might be helpful for you. So thank you for bringing that up. That's true for a lot of people, that they practice something and then when they go to use it, it doesn't always happen the same way in real life. Thank you so much for your super chat, your gift. I really appreciate it, and thank you for being here. I'm glad that that this content is helpful for you, and congratulations for having a channel about games as well, and studying English. Please feel free to ask me any questions today in the chat as well. Okay, we have a question about the schwa sounds and pronouncing them in isolation. Okay, so talking about the word, oops, I misspelled it. The word above has both types of schwa in it. And I often use this as an example where for the schwa sound, which by the way is on our new channel, Pronounce English Speech, was this most recent video. It was all about schwa. We have the stressed schwa, which sounds like and the unstressed schwa, which sounds like Now I could hold this longer and it would sound the same as this. They're both just tongue down, relaxed, and voice on. So it's a very central vowel. My mouth's not too open. My tongue is very gently resting in the bottom of my mouth. It's the same position I have for the ah for the tongue, but my mouth is more open for ah. For it's just more flat and more lax. So in above, the only difference between these two sounds, the schwa, the stressed schwa and the unstressed schwa, is that this one is short, above. And I would say the positioning for the doesn't have to be as exact. For the of above, I need to have a good solid relaxed tongue at the bottom and central. For this schwa, it's going to depend on the sounds around it because it's so fast. It's just, if I'm saying like go above and beyond, go above, I'm just sliding through that kind of central position as I'm saying the other sounds versus, so I can even almost think of it as like if I did go above, yeah, you can hear the I is kind of too high for that, go above. It's above. Maybe in that context, it's above, my will be a little bit higher. It's really just that this one is so short and is reduced. This one is long and clear. So in a word like some or money, it needs to have that clear, correct position of the sound. Otherwise, those two are basically the same. Some versions of the vowel quadrangle show the this a little higher and this a little lower. I think that's typically how the positioning is shown, but I think this is just much more flexible because it's going to be very reduced and influenced by the sounds around it, whereas this one is a solid vowel on its own and needs to be in the right place. I hope you heard me saying enough times. And notice how I just said I hope you. The filler sounds that we use in English are also the schwa sound. So when we sing or that's the position of the tongue for the home base for American English and how we use schwa and why it's the most common sound in English. It's in all of these unstressed syllables of longer words, and it's in our reductions as well. If I'm saying gonna go to the, I use a schwa instead of the oo of to. It's my home base, and it's the main most common sound in English. Okay, definitely worth spending some time on that sound. Welcome everyone if you're just joining us, and I'm working my way through your questions and requests, so feel free to put those in the chat or in the comments after class. We have a question about where the stress falls on the word refrigerator. So a clue is that we sometimes call a refrigerator just a fridge, and that's where the stress is. So we have refrigerator. So that means that the erator needs to be fast, and the r is not going to really be a re, it's just going to be a schwa or an I sound, refrigerator. So I would write that. I think I say it with more of a schwa. In the dictionary, it's probably going to show it with an I. Refrigerator with the flap. Oh, I'm running out of room. So I would write that r or ri. Refrigerator. Flap sound for that T, refrigerator. What's in the refrigerator? We need to clean the refrigerator. Your refrigerator is running. It's an old prank call. Okay, let's see. We have a question about the flap T in water and butter. So a flap T is or D. So the flap sound, we use it for T and D in English. Other languages use it for R. It's one roll of a rolled R. My tongue is tapping up and dropping down. Water, butter. It's just a light little, you can think of it as a light D, but we use it for a word like middle, or let's do one with, so we have water, butter, so with the flap and the and if I had a word, for example, like bidder, someone who bids, that's going to be the same as bitter. The butter was bitter, for example. So you can think of it as D if that helps you. You don't want a strong D, not a strong D, not bidder, not building up any pressure there. I'm just lifting my tongue up. Bitter, bitter. And sometimes people find this extra difficult when it's connected with the sound, because either you have a language where you roll the R, so you're trying to do the new American, or you're trying to do the new American R, but this one is like your R, and then that's confusing. The other thing that I find is difficult for people is that the is pulled more back. So if I start with like wad, and I'm just doing that front position for that flap, wader, it makes my harder to say. So I would build this from the so saying and then a light flap, der, water. What I notice when I do that der is that my tongue is lifting much further back against the roof of my mouth. My is staying put, der. So I need to be ready for that position. And if I try to go there from a front der, it's much harder than if I'm going from to der. So you might notice that if I'm just saying day or to, my tongue can be very forward, the tip of the tongue. When I'm saying water, the tip of the tongue is further back because the is pulling the whole thing back. Okay, so that might be more detail than you wanted, but I think because you were asking specifically about ones that had the flap T and the I think that combination can be difficult for people, and I hope those tips will help you. Okay, we have a question about how to pronounce, or about the podcast. Yes, the podcast is available on this YouTube channel. It's a playlist. It's called Fluent Speaking, and I can also put a link to it. I will be putting a link in the description after class, but you can find it on our playlists. So So you're asking about following my pronunciation and still not feeling like you sound like a native speaker. Yeah, so I would say that it's really difficult to move into fully sounding like a native speaker. So try to be patient with yourself. Without listening to you, it's hard for me to tell you exactly what's happening. But it may be that, when you're saying individual words, you're saying them correctly, and when you try to put them together, it breaks down. It might be the linking that's happening. It might be just that the placement that you use is more typical of your native language. So there's a lot of different things that make it challenging. But trying to focus on being well understood and just slowly and gradually adjusting your ear and your speaking voice to be more like a native speaker. It's hard work. It's not easy. And even if you do everything that I say, you may still find that there's some frustrations. So, if you are interested in getting more specific and personalized feedback, that's something that I can offer. You can check out my individual training on my website. That may be something that is helpful to just put you on the right track. And I'm also developing an app at the moment that will be also available to give you feedback and help and guide you through the process. So I'll let you guys know when that app is available and ready to go. Okay. We have a question about whether schwa sometimes sounds more like eh. So yes, we have all of the vowels can be reduced, but the most common reduced vowels we use in English are the schwa, the and the I. And typically we use the for letter A, like in above, or letter O, like in original. And we use the I for letter E, like in return, or between, or letter I, like instead. But if you look at the vowel space, the I is here and the is here. And I would say that reduced vowel can fall anywhere in that space. I am pretty sure that in a word like because, I say almost closer to because rather than because. Because it's so short and reduced that if it's somewhere in this continuum, these two can be somewhat interchangeable in certain places. Now, there are certain words where it'll sound off and incorrect if you're using one or the other. You need to be a little higher or a little lower, but context is everything there. And yes, those are commonly reduced vowels in unstressed syllables, the I and the both. Great question and good observation. You're correct about that. Okay. We have a question about the word although and whether the L is silent. So in although, I tend to use the L there. Although. I think you could, if you did although, you could hear how it sounds slightly different. The important thing is that you're doing something to make sure that vowel sounds like the vowel in although. So you can use the dark L we were talking about at the beginning of class. We talked a lot about dark L, so you might want to go back after class and check that out on Dead Heart. Basically, if I'm not lifting my tongue for the L, although, this is a case where it might make sense not to do that because I need my tongue to be ready for the TH, although. I think that I lift and use more of the back of my tongue there, although. But you can also make the dark L where it doesn't fully lift, although, and then go right into the TH sound. So technically, I'm not necessarily doing although, two separate movements, but I don't want although. You need to hear that kind of L coloring of the vowel, and that's a classic example of where I'm going to use that dark L, that I'm making the L sound more with the back of my tongue and the vowel. So I wouldn't think of it as being gone, but it definitely is not necessarily a distinct movement from the TH and the vowel. It kind of connects the ah to the although. Yeah, so again, tricky, definitely one of the tougher nuances to get. I hope that explanation made sense to you. And nice to see you here. I'm glad you made it for the second half. Okay. We have a question about the words tyrant and sycophant. Why isn't the Y pronounced the same in these words? So Y is an example of a letter like C, where it depending on the word, it changes the context. So in a word like city, it's going to say the E sound. In a word like yellow, it's going to function like a consonant and say the Y sound. In tyrant, it's going to say the I diphthong. And as you notice, in sycophant, it's going to say the I sound. So it does that also in system, systematic, in the I, like tyrant, it says that in some other words too. And it's probably because of where these, how these words came into English. I think sycophant is probably Greek, would be my guess. And tyrant, I don't know, maybe that's more from Latin. I could look them up and let you know. But the reason why letters say different sounds in different words is often because of the origins of that word, that we're keeping some of the spelling from the original language, even though Greek has different letters. And then we're applying the phonemes and the sounds of English. It also depends on when the word came into English, because we did have different vowel sounds at different stages. And I'm not sure about these two particular words between tyrant and sycophant. I would have to look at the etymology of those words. So if you look at the history of the words, sometimes that's very revealing about why they say the sounds that they do. So yeah, words, letters like Y and C often says the K sound or the S sound, and it sometimes says the Ch sound. And again, that's usually because of how the word came into the language. Learning the symbols and being able to look them up, or having a way of thinking of this as like sick, and this like tie, or tie. It's unfortunately just something where we have to memorize what sounds they're going to make. And kids in English, as they're learning, they have to memorize spelling, because they wouldn't write either of these words that way based on the sounds of the word, which is why I respell words for you using IPA, and also using spelling patterns that match more closely, line up with the most typical spellings of English, to help you kind of visualize and remember the correct pronunciations. That's the system we use here on Speech Modification, and also in our materials on speechmodification.com, and in the app that I'm developing in our online courses. Okay, great. We have a question about British English, where R is generally silent. Yes. Okay. So for American R, what you're going to want to do to shape that, if you speak British English and you're able to say R at the start of words like red or rain, one technique you can use is, if you're trying to say a word like paper, and you have a tendency to say paper or paper, more the British way, link it together with a word that starts with R. So say paper red, and your tongue is going to be getting ready for this R of red, or paper rain, and it's going to be more likely to go into the right position for the paper. If you can't get the R of red or rain, then you need to start from the basics of pulling the tongue back, anchoring against the inner upper teeth, and the tongue can be curled back or bunched back. You can get there from trying to say grr, because that G position will help you get kind of in the right amount of backness in the mouth, and then the tightness of the grr. So a couple different techniques. You can check out my Sounds of English course, and I walk you through a ton of details on how to develop an R if you don't have one, the American R. And I also have an American R playlist here on the channel that walks you through both of these techniques as well as some others, because R is definitely one of the more difficult sounds if you don't have it in your native language in the same way. That American R, that rhotic R, doesn't exist in a lot of languages. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, we have a question about differentiating between pull and pull, and feeling like the tongue movements are similar between the ul and the ol. So for pull and pull, what I would say is they both end in the same place. So pull, ul, I have that kind of shape, ul, and then the back of my tongue, the front of my tongue just lifts up to finish the L, ul. In pull, what I'm doing here is, in the IPA, you're just going to see the O and the L. But what's really happening for pull is that I'm doing the O shape, and then to finish the word, I have to do the ul shape, ul. And between the O and the ol, I'm connecting those with a w sound. So as I move from that front O, that rounded O, I end up in the same ul that I have for pull. So if you can do pull, but then you want to do pull, you can think of pull as has the same sounds as wool. So your pull is going to have a short wool at the end. Pull. Now I'm not doing wool really dragged out as I'm saying it, like a barber's pole, or we took a pole. This pole has the same pronunciation. But I do need to go through that sequence of sounds in order to get the correct sound for ol. So again, back to our earlier conversation about the dark L, it's really about the vowels that happen before it. For O, I'm sliding and closing and ending on ul. For ul, it's more a lax shape for the lips. So I hope that helps you differentiate those two and work on, if you master pull, then you'll be able to add pull. Yeah, but they're not easy. And I do have some videos specifically about pronouncing O and L words like pull and old and whole. So check those out here on the channel. You can also get help for these patterns in our Sounds of English course on speechmodification.com. Okay, we'll take a few more questions and then we'll need to wrap up for today. I hope to be able to get to at least one of everyone's questions. If I missed yours, please leave me a comment, and I will also go through and try to answer them after class as well, giving you links and resources here on the channel. We have a question about the word necessarily and whether it has a reduced version. So let's look at necessarily. I would say this doesn't necessarily have a reduced version. It just has kind of sped up parts. So in ne, sa, or necessarily, our stress falls before the necessaire, the air syllable, the ser syllable. So you're going to have kind of a short secondary stress on the ne. So first letter E is going to say ne. And then, as I said, nessa or nesse. Then we have the air, necessairely. We just tend to, we don't drop any of these or reduce them, but we just very short on the unstressed syllables. So necessarily. So it's not necessarily true. We still need to have all of the syllables. Yeah, so not exactly a reduction, but some reduced vowel sounds within that word. Yeah, okay, thank you for that request. I hope that helped clear that up for you. Okay, we have a question about the word angry, and can we think about it like angry rather than angry? So when we have the a sound before the ing sound, ang, it tends to get raised a little bit. So we're not really saying, I'm not saying angry, but the angry, it feels not as open. So if I'm saying Mad, another synonym for angry. Mad. I can really feel open and I have time to make that a vowel, mad. But when I'm saying angry, the back of my tongue is getting ready to close to the ng. So this ng influences this a vowel and makes it more nasal, makes it higher. Some people teach people to say angry, like an a, angry. I think you don't want to intentionally change the vowel. You're still going for trying to make the a vowel, angry. But it will naturally, as you connect it to the ng, it will naturally raise and be a little bit more tense sounding, more nasal sounding. But I think if you say angry, it sounds too nasal. Angry. You shouldn't try to intentionally change that vowel. Just know that it should happen naturally as you're saying that ng sound. I do have some videos about how those front vowels change in the nasal contexts here on the channel. So if I will put a link to those in the description after class so you can get more details. Okay, great. So the goal of shadowing is to build a database of patterns, but actually acquire the accent, consciously practice mapping my own sentences onto those learned patterns. Yes, that's a very good way of saying it. And also you need to be able to practice just speaking and using those patterns in different contexts. So reading aloud is another way that you can do it where you're not, you're given what to say, so you don't have to think of what to say. You can focus more on the patterns. Repeated phrase practice, like we were saying, you can kind of build that up. And then trying to apply individual patterns as you're speaking in conversation. Even speaking out loud to yourself, verbalizing your thoughts, all of those things are going to help because it gives you more opportunity to take what's in your brain, convert it into English, convert it into language, and then do all the motor movements required for it. So it's a pretty complex pattern if you think about going from a thought to a fully expressed sentence in a conversation. There's a lot of steps that have to happen. And the more you can practice any of those steps along the way, the more natural and fluent you can be when you're trying to speak in English or in any other language that's not your native language. Okay. Wonderful. We have a question about plural words with apostrophe S's. So like parents. So when I say my parents, just the plural, I have the parents. I'm going to have the T is going to be a little bit muted or silent because of the rule of three. Parents. It's going to sound pretty much the same as an NS. And then if I say it like my parents' house, it's the same. So this pronunciation, those are my parents, and my parents' house is in another city. There's no difference between those two pronunciations. So really it's just about, you need this here if you're using it as a possessive. The difference is only in the writing, not in the pronunciation. So parents with the noun, plural noun, versus parents, the adjective that's modifying house, those sound the same. Yeah, it's a little bit tricky. So it's more often people make a spelling error, the grammar errors in writing, but it doesn't happen so much in speaking because they sound the same. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, so this was a wonderful class today. Thank you for all of your detailed questions. My apologies if I didn't get to everything that you were asking. We will probably have class next week. I'm going to be visiting my parents. I'll be at my parents' house. So it depends on how the week goes. I'll post on the channel so that you know. Definitely going to be here for sure in 2 weeks. And if I can't host a live class next Saturday, I'll post a new video for you to watch instead that day. I hope the fluent speaking practice, the techniques we've been developing for difficult words have been helping you. Let me know what else you'd like to see in this class and on the channel in your comments. It really does help the channel to grow when you comment, like, share the videos. It helps YouTube show them to more people and reach out. So that's my goal, to help as many people as possible. And thank you for being part of the channel, for your support, for your gifts. Those of you who are channel members, I appreciate all of it. And I look forward to seeing you next week, and definitely in 2 weeks if something goes wrong next week. Thanks so much for a wonderful class, and have a great Saturday, a great weekend. I look forward to seeing you. Oh, also, we have a new fluent speaking video coming out on Tuesday. We're going to be talking about the phrase, do you have a minute? And looking at how do you have can really get reduced down. So it'll be a good one for trying some of that repeated phrase practice that I was talking about earlier, and also just developing some more for that specific phrase. Okay, wonderful class, everyone. I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com. Remember, if you want to sound like a native speaker, you can do it. speechmodification.com. Bye, everyone. Thanks for a great class.